Well, welcome. This is our first meetup around this topic. It's a pretty expansive topic of immersive tech, right? There's a lot of things that fall into this category of immersive tech. As you can see on the table, we actually have a few headsets, so actual hardware related to immersive experiences. Here on the left, I have Focals by North. Last year was acquired by Google. Really amazing smart glasses that was starting to pivot and started going to some of the augmented reality, but kind of the ultimate form factor we're trying to get to of everyday wearable glasses, right? And we're able to see an early preview of that, even with Google Glass. Here, this is the latest version of the Quest, Meta Quest 2. There's an upcoming Quest, which I'll talk about in just a little bit, but I have two headsets. There's more that we'll bring at other environments, but immersive tech covers a few things, right? It covers AR, VR. It could cover things like the buzzword you've been hearing a lot of, the metaverse, right? Immersive environments where you might go and actually have a sense of location and proximity, even though it's done in a virtual space. So we're excited to have some of the people that are here with us today, as well as those that are joining online. This will be recorded, so if you want to watch it later, we'll actually have that available for you to look at, as well as our slide decks. Just a little bit about Fresh. We are Fresh Consulting. We're the ones actually hosting it. So here with us, there's a few of us here from Fresh. I'm Johnny Rodriguez. I'm our Director of Strategic Innovation at Fresh Consulting, and I head up our Fresh Labs team, which we're kind of tasked with kind of looking ahead a little bit to our different types of technology and hardware that are coming out, and get a sense for what service offerings you might consider, try to look ahead for our customers. Our name Fresh isn't just a name that was pulled out of a hat. It's very intentional. We want to help our customers stay fresh and relevant, right? So that might mean keeping up, or it might be trying to stay ahead. And so we do a lot of that. There's some background here on how many people we are. We're newer in Texas, but we actually have a pretty awesome team here. A few of us are here. We have some in Dallas, some in Houston, and we're growing constantly here in Texas. Dean's here as well, who's our managing director here of Texas. Grateful to have him as well. So, but we actually do quite a lot of different things. So we're talking a little bit about XR, extended reality. So again, AR, VR today. That's just a small piece of what we actually do, right? We actually come in and help companies on the strategic side. We can come in and help with design, whether that's a product like industrial design, or actually getting into experiences online, mobile experiences. So it can be from the digital to the physical realm on the design side. And then software, it goes pretty expansive as well. We can go from the software, mobile, web, and then into the kind of these immersive experiences as well. And we actually do go into hardware. So we're actually building a lot of robots. Some are autonomous industrial vehicles. Some of them is test automation, testing products you may have heard about that we can't really talk about, but we do a wide spectrum. So it allows us to really get a holistic view into product development and how businesses might actually be able to, again, keep up and stay ahead and those kinds of things. So just a little bit of a background. There's a lot more. You can go visit our website at freshconsulting.com, and where you can see more of our stuff there. But that's just a little plug of Fresh Consulting. But really, more than anything, we're just excited to be here in Texas and talk about, and actually we were quite present in the Meetup space in Seattle. Nuriel led a lot of those. I led some. We were doing things for WordPress and development and design and doing a lot of stuff there. And now that we have a presence here, and some of us have moved here, some of us have started here, we really want to just create a community of other like-minded individuals and people in the business, whether you're coming from a technical background or design background or strategy side, and to start looking at these immersive technologies and think about how we might apply some of the things we're learning, maybe practical applications or entry points to be able to leverage this technology, right? And so hopefully there's a lot of competitive advantages you're going to get out of this. We're going to try to be really hands-on as we go month to month. We're going to actually be doing more hands-on type things as well. Today, even on my portion, I'll have some QR codes you can go and scan and actually see what experiences look like as well. So that'll be pretty fun. Today's meeting agenda is there's two of us, and both from Fresh this time. So again, Johnny Rodriguez, I'll be talking about practical applications for XR, and then Nuriel, who is our UX design lead, also here from Texas. He's covering the topic of design principles for immersive experiences. And I don't know anybody else that's more qualified to talk about design principles and immersive experiences. He designs and codes and does business and strategy. And I could name 10 other things that would really wow you about him, but he's going to be awesome. And some meetups we'll be up front. Others, we want you to come up and share some things, and we'll kind of collaborate and work together to kind of make this a really great experience for those here in Texas and those that might be joining remotely. We might even host some of these in the metaverse, right? Like actually put some people in a virtual environment and do some things like that as well. So that will be fun. So I guess let's dive in a little bit to the topic of today. Let me set a little bit of a timer. I want to be respectful to Nuriel as well, right? To give him some time. I get really passionate about these topics and I can talk about them for a really long time. I don't want to do that. I do want to go deep enough where we can actually get some tangible things to take away and bring back to our businesses, but high level enough that we can kind of have this be a multi-month kind of training or opportunities to learn and talk about things. We can share some of the things we've been doing as well. So let's get into practical business applications for XR. So this is what's really interesting to me. Some of this might be covered by my Zoom controls here, but just in the last week, there's been about 10 major pieces of news around this augmented reality and virtual reality space, which again is under the umbrella of extended reality. Let me jump to that first really quickly so I can show that. This is a slide I often like to share. It shows this spectrum of augmented reality where you might be adding things to the physical world. So if I was here with you, it might actually give me your names above your head and it kind of pins in the environment, right? And I can actually see things that might be things that you're familiar with Amazon, right? Placing products and furniture in your environment. On the virtual reality, you're starting to actually put a lens over the world and be a little bit more immersive. So you get into the virtual space. This is, I think, a place where most people are more familiar because you have quite a lot of VR headsets that are out there where people are experiencing virtual reality. So it's a little bit more immersed, but it's a spectrum. And the spectrum itself, kind of encompassing all of it, is extended reality. So when we say XR, what we mean is kind of AR, VR, and we could probably put a few other things under there like smart glasses and other things that might fall under there. But that's kind of why we're bringing up some of this in the news related things that have happened. So for example, this morning I woke up and I saw this news. Walmart rolls out new AR feature to let you try on virtual clothing. Just a small little video associated with it. We don't have a connection with Walmart. I'm not trying to promote Walmart, but it's just fascinating to see some of the biggest players that are in the e-commerce space, right? We know Amazon has had incremental advancements in their augmented reality kind of feature set for their mobile app. So again, being able to place furniture, and that's been growing and growing over time. We see other things now, like a few months ago, we saw them release shoe try on, right? So if you think about major shoe brands, you can actually be in your Amazon app, point down towards your feet and try on shoes before you buy them. Pretty impressive things. A lot of the applications in AR are focused on the e-commerce, and that's a lot of times what we see. And I get the question all the time, okay, well, I'm a services company, or hey, I have a different type of product. Maybe mine can't be worn. It isn't maybe a product that gets placed. It might be something that sits on your desk, or it sits on your, maybe it's a watch, or maybe it's different things like that. Services, right? Fresh Consulting is a services company, and a lot of services companies have asked that. And so I'm hoping to dive into that a little bit today. But Walmart, going back to this a little bit, they just rolled out this AR feature. So we're seeing another major player release something in AR. I think that enabled, from what I saw, like 200 and something thousand products that can now be tried on through Walmart, which is pretty crazy. Disney this last week, actually, I think the video came out today, but this got released maybe 4 days ago. But Disney, if you have Disney Plus, you can actually go do this today. You just go look for the film called Remembering, and it actually has a companion augmented reality experience. First time I've ever seen that, I think, in anything of these major streaming services: Apple TV, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus. There's a lot of players in this, and Disney's released the first of its kind augmented reality experience. And there's a certain part of the actual experience, which I'll play this in the background. There's a certain part of the actual experience where, you get to this waterfall, as you can see here on the screen. And if you're watching from home, right, you can hold up your iPad or your iPhone, and it starts to add this layer where you see a waterfall come out and a tree, and it's beautiful, right? It's like you can see a lot of really kind of immersive things there and experience, and you're just pointing at your television screen, right? Still a little bit convenient because you have the form factor of a phone as opposed to something that you already have on your face, but still a really big increment or a big jump in the space of entertainment, right? And films and movies, and starting to see that. I would imagine we're going to see more, depending on how this does, see more and more experiences with this, maybe on Netflix and these other kind of bigger streaming platforms. Snapchat, and I'll fly through some of these. Snapchat today, again, this type of news happening all the time. Snapchat just launched that they're on the web. So for those that haven't seen that, they actually have, I think they're in the 200 or 300 million daily active user mark using augmented reality. And I don't mean just putting a mask on or making your hair look green or putting on, you know, funny antlers, like a lot of times you would see with augmented reality and Snapchat. We're talking like experiences where you might flip the camera and actually look at your environment. And they're starting to do things like geo-related augmented reality experiences where you can go up to buildings and see and unlock certain things. This is one I just used today. I was all in the browser and actually seeing a Verizon, this was an advertisement, but it actually had quite a lot of applications of like moving your head and, you know, kind of interacting with an experience, unlocking things, being able to, so you see a lot of those kinds of ads, but the fact that it's in the browser is a huge, huge deal for augmented reality. And we can talk about that in a little bit more. So not only have they, not only is Snapchat spelled wrong, I just realized Snapchat, not only is it on the phone where you have these hundreds of millions of people every day using it, because it's now in the browser, it's going to enable things like, for example, today I could have had a QR code that you scanned, and whether you have the Snapchat app or not on your phone, you could launch an augmented reality experience. So the accessibility of these experiences is getting even closer and closer. So really fascinating piece of news there. Side note on Snapchat as well is Samsung Galaxy. So their A series of their phones, which is mainly in other countries right now. I think they're in India, Germany, Indonesia, Brazil, Philippines, and Mexico, right? Not the US yet, but a lot of their Galaxy A phones, they have Snapchat built into the native camera. So if you think about what happened with the QR code, if you remember that experience of QR codes requiring an app download for you to actually have an experience. That's actually how I proposed to my wife, by the way. I had a QR code scavenger hunt where I took my wife around the city and I had this whole thing planned. It was totally a Johnny way to propose to his wife, not an Alyssa way to propose to, you know, the way she wanted to propose. I went the way I wanted. Learned that very early on that I should have made it more towards her. I had a single point of failure. And the point was very first experience. Okay, scan this QR code to begin the scavenger hunt. Guess what? She didn't have a QR code app on her phone. She didn't know what that was. And somebody had to help her. So I already had my point of failure, right? Fast forward 10 years, they're natively built now into our phones. So if you have an iPhone, you have an Android, you can actually just pull out your camera, scan a QR code. Those that have experienced it understand that, but it's built natively. And so when we're talking about smartphones that are in your pocket, coming natively with one of the most powerful augmented reality platforms out there, and it's native on the OS, that's a huge deal. The announcement from today was that they hit the 2.5 billion, they've used it 2.5 billion times on their phones. And so that was like a big landmark for that, for Samsung Galaxy and kind of that partnership with Snapchat. Another piece of news was around the MetaQuest Pro. So this is the latest headset. Mark Zuckerberg, I think, went on to Joe Rogan here in Austin, another Austin person, but he went on to there and actually announced, hey, next month during the Connect event, which by the way is October 11th, we're going to be announcing and sharing the MetaQuest Pro, right? So he shared that a few weeks ago. And then this week there was a leaked video. Somebody left one in a hotel, I guess, and somebody took a video and showed it. So maybe it's true or not, maybe it's faked. I have no idea. But the point is there's a lot of buzz around this upcoming incremental, like I guess next iteration is what I'm trying to go for. The next iteration of the MetaQuest, the Pro version. And there's a lot of hype around that. So as we do more and more meetups, we're going to have one of those. Hopefully we have one earlier. We're trying to get one a little early and be able to show that to you guys. So for those that are thinking about joining, you might consider coming to see what that might look like and some experiences that we'll be building. PSVR, a lot of tech sites actually got their hands on them, even though it's not released till 2023. Today, the videos dropped. So if you want to see what's going on in that space from a really, really high-end VR headset, it's still tethered, meaning it's plugged in with a single cable to your PlayStation 5, but it's still a really powerful experience. Adidas doing some advertising on their actual storefront location, all on the browser. Shopify, they have a team that's like building a lot of kind of interesting prototypes and work. And so they're doing a lot. You're seeing more and more companies, and I won't go through all of these, but there's more and more news happening. I just wanted to show, I think the point I want to make is every week there's massive amounts of updates and like lots of news focused on this AR, VR space. And it's accelerating every single week. And it's something that we shouldn't ignore. There's quite a lot of people using them. I think the impression is sometimes for some businesses is, yeah, that's pretty cool, but that's kind of more for like larger, like Coca-Cola and like bigger brands that might have experiences. But we're actually seeing a lot of businesses find real applications and use cases for leveraging AR to do quite a lot of different things. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. On the augmented reality side, I think as we look at this particular smart glasses, right, thinking about how this might iterate from having a little, what this has is essentially when I had these on, I wore these for 8 months. There was a screen maybe 6 feet in front of me that was just floating. It didn't actually pin to the real world. And it gave me access to things that I wish I had right now, like slide deck notes. It gave me, as I was talking to somebody, it would mute my notifications. And as soon as I stopped talking, it would recognize that. And then it would give me, hey, you missed 3 notifications. And I could view messages from people that were in my favorites on my phone, right? My wife or my dad or whatever it might be. I could put on some social media applications, but my usage of technology went down by about 30% by actually having an everyday wearable. And what we're going to see in my prediction is similar to what the Apple Watch did for, like a lot of the computing things that you carry, everyday wearable devices. We're going to see that happen with augmented reality as well. So lots of quotes that I'll skip for now. This shows a little bit of a chart. I'll share this later, but it kind of shows some of the progressive updates that have happened over the years in the space of augmented reality. Again, and now we're in I think as we hit 2022, I wish we could have like a week by week or a month by month view of all the things that are happening there, because it's accelerating pretty quickly. Today's augmented reality headsets, the actual ones that are truly augmented reality, you see them on the screen. There's been a few more that have been announced. But these are the latest ones that you can see now. So this is 7 different AR headsets. And again, this is the question we get a lot of. Which augmented reality headset should I use for my business or for my experience? And some people aren't surprised to hear this, but the answer is actually none of them. The answer is the phone. It's still the most accessible. That doesn't mean that you don't want to use the AR headsets or that you shouldn't build experiences, but it might be for a specific niche or like a specific use case or maybe an industrial application. And until that becomes more wearable, everyday wearable, it's not something we're recommending our businesses to go and start doing. Now, it doesn't mean don't form a plan for it. Definitely have a plan for how you might leverage that in the future. But today's devices, the most accessible augmented reality experience today would be a browser-based augmented reality experience. And the reason for that, again, is we have our smartphone in our pocket. Most people there, I would bet that there are 95% or higher of people that are going to watch this or watching it live or watching it later. They have a phone that is capable of having a high-end augmented reality experience just right in their pocket without having to download an application and being able to do that all in the browser. So the entry point for augmented reality is really low now if you're able to do browser-based things. So then let's jump into some of the use cases for this. So if we're thinking about practical business applications for augmented reality, there's quite a lot there. I think we've identified 8 and they're growing. There's different ways. And we could probably share maybe like, I don't know, easily 10, 20 examples on each of these. I just try to grab a few that I thought would be relevant to maybe those that would be watching. So let's see if we can get this to load. There we go. So on the bottom left, so I guess use case number 1 is a personalized contextual education. So like being able to actually educate the end user on something that might be more personalized to the product or personalized to them. What you're seeing is quite a lot here. So the one from Adidas that I brought up earlier on the news is on the right. So being able to have some education about their initiative that they have with the ocean. And so there's some fun experiences tied to it, but there's actually an educational piece where it tells you like most oceans have this or most this has that. The one on the left is actually one we built. We kind of partnered with United Rentals when we were building a fleet of industrial autonomous vehicles. And we were partnered, we kind of joined what was called NI Week. National Instruments has like a once a year event that they have. We were on the center floor with them, showing some of the work we've done. And we actually brought in an augmented reality experience where some of our team could hand somebody an iPad and they could go around this Bobcat, this like these different vehicles, right? A club car and a Bobcat were the two vehicles we had. And as you kind of went and scanned it, so there you go, it kind of popped up contextual education and information about like, here's how we use this sensor. Here's a video about the team that built it. Here's different things. It also did, so you're seeing like different use cases here where we bring up information. It also pinned it to the actual sensor and you could actually watch and hear the video and all that. So that was a kind of a fun experience. That's definitely an application we're seeing a lot of is contextual education. We're seeing a lot of that sometimes even around the office. So thinking about, hey, we just got a new coffee machine. Some companies are using augmented reality to say, hey, here's a step-by-step guide to actually go and do that, which kind of gets us into some of the other categories. Number two is contextual product shopping. So if you have a phone, you can scan this right now, if you're here or virtually. But you've probably seen this. So Apple just had their event. This is actually the version before, but in any of their products, on apple.com, if you're in Safari, right? Like if you're on an iPhone and you go to a specific product at the bottom, you can actually place that product in your environment. So if you want to see what the Mac Pro looks like, if you want to see the new iPhone 14 that just got announced or the iPad, different types of things like that, that actually lets you, if you kind of scroll down there, you'll see a little augmented reality experience. We'll say, use AR to see the MacBook Pro 13 in your workspace. So you see that. We talked about Walmart using product shopping, right? In this case, apparel and things like that you'd wear. Amazon, that would be furniture, products. And so lots of companies. So if you're a company that has a product to share, and one of the decision points, if you think about one of the factors in somebody's decision-making process to buy the product or not, has to do with seeing it contextually, right? If it's furniture or product on your desk or in your environment, in your house, those kinds of things. AR is a very, very practical business application for kind of showcasing that and giving them a chance to use that. Quite a lot of people are using it. I think apple.com hasn't really shared it. Amazon's released some stats around it. I think we're going to see maybe, consider that today, Walmart launched it. A year from now, we're going to probably get a lot of stats on people's usage of augmented reality for these experiences. But those are some really good ways that people are using AR. Another one is remote repairs and maintenance. So this is through a company called ThingWorks, PTC. I think they were called PTC Studio. There's been some changes and acquisitions and all that, but you can actually see remote repairs. So actually somebody being on the other end saying, hey, let me circle this for you. Why don't you go turn this knob and do this or do that? And you can actually remotely do that just using your phones. If you did happen to have like the HoloLens or kind of an AR headset, that's something that could be used for that. But that's been an application we've seen from the industrial side of things. Machinery training is another one we see a lot of, where somebody, again, maybe heavy machinery, something that might be a little bit more dangerous to kind of interact with or have a lot of steps to it. There's a lot of machinery training. So this would be less so like I'm performing the job and I'm using augmented reality to do the job. It's more of like, let's train somebody on this piece of machinery. This new, it could be like a big tractor, a big machine in a different factory. A lot of that is, there's been a lot of industrial applications for that, which has been pretty cool. This is another one that's pretty fun, which is personal training. We actually have gotten a lot of inquiries about this at Fresh, where people are asking, hey, can we use augmented reality to help onboard our employees? So, right, they might be a services business. They could be any kind of business, but they're thinking, can we simplify the process to train our people and show them, for example, where are our offices? Where can you find things, right? Theoretically here, when you walked in, we could have said, hey, here's an iPad. This is going to show you where the restrooms are, where you can go get water and get ice. Here's where you can go see it can even give you a tour of how, in this particular environment, industrious, how it works, rental costs, things like that, right? There can actually be training for, so not only your people, but maybe your guests that are coming. So there's a lot of contextual training that can happen there. These are both experiences. The one on the right comes from somebody on our team. They worked at a company that had done a lot around this space to make it really accessible for companies to go do it. So it looks a little bit older in style, but you can see kind of the features and functionality that provided, being able to say, hey, this is where engineering sits, this is where design sits, this is where marketing sits. So a lot of that kind of training. Bringing data to life is another really interesting one. We're seeing a lot in that space as well. This is showing a big machine. Again, it's similar to like machine training, but in this particular cases, we actually want to get relevant data overlaid on top of our things, of our environment. So there's actually an application I've seen where there's a company that, or a farm essentially, that has all these different cows, sensors on them. So you could like use augmented reality to not only find the cows, but actually see what the production level is on how much milk and their health. And it has all these sensors, and that gets overlaid and pinned, right? So you can see how that works here, where they have this machine and it's telling you where things are at. This is a video that talks more about them. They're doing that from an augmented reality glasses standpoint. Tells you more information around it. Here's the model number. Here's how the wheels are. So it can give you a lot of that information. We talked about the gamified marketing. I like this one from Walden Bank, where they talked about, hey, what's the future of banking going to be like? You walk into a store, you can pull up your phone, and they're showing that you get greeted by somebody. That's something that's similar with Chase. JP Morgan Chase has a version of that, where somebody greets you and tells you, hey, what are you looking for today? Is it this or is it this? And you can actually go and pull some things up. So they're kind of showing you a vision of what the future of banking might look like. So there's a lot of the gamified marketing. The entry points for the marketing parts and advertising is actually quite low if you leverage a lot of the technology, a lot of the platforms that we've started to talk about. So again, Snapchat is a big one. In a future meetup, we're going to talk about those entry points. Like, hey, here's a practical way to get in using Snapchat, or using maybe it's Instagram's version of that, or it might be a browser-based one like Eighth Wall is one we like a lot. So there's quite a lot of platforms to be able to kind of enter into the space and start to make experiences. So this at a high level, here's some of those things. I mentioned some of these, and I didn't mention a few other ones. If you that are watching, or again, in person or virtually, have other use cases, or if you've used it or have seen other applications, I'd love to get a comprehensive list of this. So definitely reach out, let us know, and we'll try to see if we can put some good examples so that we can make this like the resource that we can reference for applications for augmented reality. I'm not going to dive too deep into the virtual reality, just to make sure we have some time for Nuriel. But on the virtual reality space, again, it gets into the more immersive side of things, and there's quite a lot of applications there. There's a lot of headsets that exist today, the Meta Quest 2 being the most accessible, the most highly adopted. I think the market share for Meta is quite high, in the 80% or higher of the market share of VR, with the Quest 2 coming next month. Keep an eye on what TikTok's doing with Pico. They did an acquisition last year, and they are announcing something next Friday. So that'll be really interesting to see what TikTok's coming out with from a VR perspective. We suspect it's going to be a competitor to the Quest, which will be interesting. But the Meta Quest 2 is still our recommendation for the headset to leverage for experiences that you might be building, for a number of reasons. And similar to AR, there's other applications. Just the overview for today on that is there's a lot of the virtual training. So being able to simulate a situation, right? Hey, there's a disaster that's happening or something malfunctioned. You can actually simulate and allow somebody to go through that training process and learn that in a virtual space that's less expensive, right, than having to deal with it live or just talk about it or read it. You can actually simulate environments to do some of that kind of thing. There's also a lot of telepresence that's happening in virtual reality, where you might want to see what something will look like. And so you can actually place 3D models in a virtual space. A lot of the VR headsets today are allowing kind of the LiDAR turns on and the cameras turn on to scan a room. So then you can actually use the space, right? If I had my VR headset and walked around, it would kind of scan this room, map it out. And so as I'm walking around with this immersive VR headset, I don't bump into things, but also I can start to place things in my environment or interact with others. There's a lot happening there. The onboarding is still a big piece in that. The hands-on walkthroughs. I talked about the digital twin meaning a clone or a similar to a physical environment, being able to have a twin of a physical environment in a virtual environment that you can walk through in VR and things like that. And then a lot of the immersive branded experiences. So I went to South by Southwest, and I would say the entire XR section was in that category of immersive branded experiences. Some of them were films that were trying to be in festivals. Some were actually showcasing actual brands and how that might be leveraged. And so that was really interesting to kind of see some of the different things there. I plan on diving deeper. I'm barely touching on the VR space, but I plan on diving deeper into maybe one or two of these categories in the future. So if there's interest in a specific one that we want to dive down and actually see maybe some work we've done there or how we would approach a specific use case, that would be kind of a fun challenge and something we could do together as part of the kind of the meetup over time. So let us know on that. Nuriel, I'll give you the time now. That's the end of the kind of XR portion.
Cool. Thanks, Johnny. It's really cool to see how things are progressing and how fast things are developing in this industry. Today, I'm going to talk about design principles for designing immersive experiences. And I had to split in multiple parts because I end up with about 20 principles for just one section of a framework that I'm about to propose. So today I'm going to talk about one of the main factors for designing immersive experiences. So first of all, thanks for coming. Like Johnny mentioned, I'm Nuriel. I'm a UX design lead for Fresh Consulting. For the past 10 years, I've been designing digital experiences. And recently, I joined the Texas team and the Fresh Labs team here in Texas. So I'm excited to be working in this new space. And for the last couple of years, I've been very interested about this new technology, these new the advancements and development in immersive experiences. I've been working on some side projects. I designed an AR application for taking care of plants. And I'm also working on a virtual campus for our company in Spatial, which we will open access to the public soon. And also I worked on a couple of projects for our clients that unfortunately I'm not able to share, but I worked on a learning platform and I worked on also a VR app for designing a football fan room. So I had some experience in this field, but it's really excited to see how it develops. So I want to start by talking about this immersive experiences like the people from the Immersive Design Summit did. So basically an immersive experience, the sense of becoming lost within an experience or story. A participant in an immersive experience becomes so fully engrossed that the concerns and responsibilities of the real world fade away, replaced by an immediate sense of importance and worth. Immersive techniques move beyond screens, pages, and stages to an embodied experience. Okay, so the point I'm trying to make is that VR has achieved a level today that it really does create an illusion. We did cross that point in which in research studies, people report that they feel as when they are using a VR headset, they report that it feels real. It feels as if they were really there in an alternative reality, and that's a very powerful tool for creating new interactions and taking storytelling to a new level that can benefit many different industries, and it's gathering interest from many different multiple disciplines. So from my experience developing VR and AR experiences, I've gathered these design principles, and after reviewing some material from research that's been done in this field, I'm proposing a new framework that expands on what researchers have been studying, because so far you see a lot of focus on the presence and the immersive side of things. Basically, researchers are focusing on, does this experience does it feel real? Does it convince the user that they're out there, even though they totally understand that they're not in this reality? Do they feel as if they've been transported somewhere else? And the answer is yes. But all of the research and study that's been done is focusing on that part, and is not taking that holistic look that a UX designer or UX researcher would do in terms of looking holistically at the experience to make sure that the user not only is impressed by the experience and is having fun, but also they have the will to dive deeper and explore that environment that you're creating and also return to that experience. So what I'm proposing is to expand on the research that's been done that covers mostly immersion to add the principles of UX design for exploration and the principles for content design for the narrative. Two other pillars that together make sure that these immersive experiences that we're building are not only impressive, but are also useful and meaningful. I like to propose that we look beyond the realism and interactivity to account for navigation and content, because navigation will allow the user to successfully explore that environment, and a good narrative gives meaning to the experience and fulfills the user's sense of accomplishment, which are really important. So for example, this is one of the scientific articles that I mentioned that cover the illusion part and the immersion. And they do a great job at doing this. That's why I'm linking this article. It's a great source of information for how these experiences are evaluated by scientists. But again, they're not covering that navigation and narrative part. They're so crucial to create a truly rich experience. For this presentation, I'm only going to cover the part of immersion, narrative and exploration. I'm going to do on the next part. But for immersion, we looked at I looked at the headset manufacturers and the researchers that are researching this field to try to understand what has been studied and what have been learned so far. So yes, so immersion, I decompose that into 4 parts. It starts with illusion. Illusion has been broken down in 3 different types of illusion that are not possible in any other type of media today. And by illusion, we mean that VR and AR can cause people to experience a reality that is completely different from what's happening around them, to the point that their bodies will respond in a realistic way. For example, there's a study that mentioned how they use EEG to measure people's brain signals, and they noticed that when people's virtual bodies are threatened, the brain signals respond just like they would if their real bodies were being threatened. And we can see other evidence like that with experiences like walk the plank. So this is a screenshot of this study where people first put on the headset and they walk on this plank that is like just a couple feet above the ground, but then they proceed on to doing the same thing, but on a plank that is much higher up. And it was noticed that their vital signals, their body response just as if they were in that height. And also, this is another study that was made. It was they recreated a rock concert from the 80s, and also people reported there was a big difference between the experience of males and females, and they noticed that people react much like they would react on a real live concert. People even mentioned things like that they found it was a little bit inaccurate, like because this was a concert from the 80s. People were mentioning, oh, in back then, people used to smoke in these concerts, but nobody's smoking here. So you could see the age of the people that were in the studies, but you notice that people reacted to these experiences much like they would be in reality. And this is another study. It's a study of how shy males react to a female approaching them at a party, and actually in this study they lost the EEG data. They only have the questionnaire that they did at the end, but at the end they arrived at a similar conclusion that the participants that were shy before, they experienced the same feelings when they were in this experience, and males that don't have that attitude, they had a similar experience as well. So illusion is a key part of creating immersive experiences. It is the first bridge that you need to cross to bring in people to believing that they left the room that they're in, even though they understand that they're still there, but they are now living in an alternative reality. So a few principles to make sure that you're covering your bases when preparing an illusion. So first, adding more sensory channels. Basically, the more senses you stimulate on a person, the more immersive it will feel. Sometimes that does not always translate to a better experience, but to cover the illusion, the more you add, the more realistic it's going to feel. So, for example, here we're looking at a study that was made, and they were testing how adding different stimulation to different sensors. For example, they first started with only visual, and then it was a driving experience. But then they added, what if we add audio, and what if we add haptics on the hands, and what if we add haptics to the seat? And as they were adding more and more sensors, users reported a deeper sense of immersion in the experience. The next principle is keeping in mind the three types of illusions. So I feel like I didn't cover these in depth, so I'm going to talk about them now. So basically, illusion is broken down into three types of illusion. There is place illusion and plausibility illusion. So place illusion is basically, do I believe that I'm in a different place? Once you cover that, then there is the plausibility illusion, which is, are the things that are happening in this new reality, are they really happening? For example, if I see a person moving around in this immersive experience, is that a pre-recorded activity that's just going to keep repeating, or is that actually a person walking that will have a real effect in this new reality that I'm in? So that's plausibility experience. And not only that, but also, are the things that are happening in this reality match my expectation for this reality? For example, I mentioned in the rock concert, people that mentioned, oh, there's nobody smoking in the concert. So when people come to your experience, they will come with their preconceptions of what a certain reality will look like. And as long as you're matching those, they don't really need to match the real world. For example, in VR, we already seen that there are experiences that have teleportation or invisibility or flying, things that we cannot do in our reality, but we have a pretty good understanding of how that would work. And if our simulation of the reality matches that, then we're covering the plausibility illusion. And finally, embodiment illusion, that is less required for creating a feeling of presence, but it is another level that once achieved, it adds to immersion, and it makes a person feel more as if they were there. So another design principle for creating illusion is degrees of freedom. So for both VR headsets and the controllers, there are some that are limited to 3 degrees of freedom, meaning they can only rotate in place. Think of like the experience of watching a 360 video, as in you can look around, but you can't really take a step to your side or forward or backwards to look around things. You're locked in that position, and that's the 3 degrees of freedom. And 6 degrees of freedom are devices like the Quest or the HTC, where you can not only look around, but you can also move around. And basically, the more degrees of freedom that you offer, the more immersive the experience will feel. And the next one, alternatively, when manipulating elements in an immersive environment, the more degrees of freedom that you give, the more complex becomes to interact with that object. So typically, we want to reduce the requirements for dealing with something. So for example, we're very used to working with 2D interfaces. So and also in studies, it's been observed that when people are in a 3D environment and they need to manipulate objects, move things around, they typically break down that activity into first moving into a one-dimensional axis at a time, because it's easier for our brains to deal with that. So for example, if you need to draw something, or if you need to move an object inside another object, if you allow the user to move things vertically and horizontally first, and then you allow them to move things in that depth axis, then it will be easier for the user to be successful in those tasks. So basically, improving degrees of freedom for locomotion and for orientation, and for manipulation, you want to reduce those degrees of freedom. The last design principle for illusion is to really focus on your audience and understanding their expectations for the reality that you're creating for them, and making sure, like I mentioned in the plausibility illusion, that the things that are happening in this environment match the environment. So that is illusion. Now I want to move to locomotion. When studying illusion, researchers observed that the way people explore new realities is they do it just like we would explore our reality. So basically, they move around, they look around, and it's basically with our eyes and our legs. That's how we explore our surroundings. So locomotion is a key part of creating immersive experiences that will drive your users to explore and look around. And it's important to understand that it's mentioned on the Oculus design guidelines that even the simplest apps that don't have a lot of interaction, that could be a surprising number of situations where locomotion will have a major impact on the user experience. So it's important to maximize, it's important to plan for maximizing the quality of your locomotion system, meaning offer the six degrees of freedom and make sure that the user can move freely within that environment. And within locomotion, there are two types of locomotion. There is the physical, in which, like I mentioned, we use our heads and our body to move around. And there is the artificial locomotion, which is using a controller, using a thumbstick, or other types of inputs to move around. And a few design principles when dealing with locomotion is that plan for some physical movement, even for stationary experiences. So even if you're planning on using artificial locomotion to allow your users to move around, you need to account for the user moving their heads left or right, or backwards or forwards in their seat. Account for some movement, even though that they're locked in on the artificial locomotion system. Make sure that there is some distance between the user and the walls in case they move their head and they can peep through the walls, and make sure that other objects are also slightly away from them to make sure that they don't clash there. The next principle is to allow the user of artificial locomotion on all types of apps. So even if your app is designed for physical locomotion, you need to understand that there are all types of people with different abilities, and sometimes there are people with limited space. So they won't have a lot of room to move around. So providing that artificial locomotion in addition to the physical locomotion will ensure that anybody can navigate on any type of environment. Looks like I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna speed up. So also supporting multiple locomotion techniques. So basically, there will be people that are very familiar with VR and they can move around really fast, and they already habituated themselves with the cyber sickness, and they don't suffer a lot from that. So they're used to moving around really fast, and they're just coming in, they're not as familiar. So they might get a little bit of motion sickness, or sometimes they're going to be a little bit sensitive to how fast you move or turn. So being able to allow for the user to select the type of preference, whether they want to snap turn or whether they want to move freely. If you can allow the user to select what they prefer, you will ensure that they have a better experience. And then for locomotion, also minimizing acceleration, because the user really isn't accelerating physically when they're moving their body in VR. That can cause a little bit of mismatch between what we're seeing but what our body is feeling, and that can cause some discomfort. So if you make sure you accelerate gradually to account for that. Using realistic walking and running speeds is also very important. Typically on games or other digital experiences, we give the user the character moves in unrealistic speeds, but make sure that when creating an immersive experience that we're matching the typical rate that we walk and run. Okay, so for controls, so most VR devices will offer either 3 degrees of freedom, or some sort of other type of input method. And the controllers will have different capabilities and different button arrangements. So each controller will have their own best practices. So it's important to understand what device we're designing for and which controllers will be used so you can map the buttons appropriately. A few principles for when dealing with controls for your immersive experiences. First, maintain a 1-to-1 ratio between the movement of the user controllers in the real world and the movement of the virtual presentation. So users will feel like if their hands are not moving exactly at the speed of their hands in real life, they're going to feel like the tracking is lagging and is not really working very well. So that breaks the illusion. And also use the standard button mapping for your application. Some power users for VR, they're already familiar with what certain buttons do. So tapping on that knowledge and taking advantage of that can help users become familiar with their app faster. Menus should not be open with gaze. You should use the either controller or the buttons, because it's not as intuitive to use gaze. And as the users are looking around, it's going to be much faster to use a button or to use the controller to open up a menu. And lastly, VR users can be either left-handed or right-handed. So making sure we accommodate for both sets of users when designing the experience will ensure that more people can have a comfortable experience using your app. All right, and then comfort. So although researchers have not yet proved that there is a link between the feeling of presence and discomfort, I believe it's not unreasonable to expect that discomfort is somewhat related to a desirable experience, meaning in order for the users to feel the desire to not only enter your new reality, but also explore it and come back to it, it's important that they feel comfortable, that they feel welcome, and they feel safe in that environment. Unless they're entering that experience specifically to not feel safe, which sometimes it can happen. But if you want to have a pleasant experience, you want them to feel comfortable, safe, and welcome. But there is a link between comfort and productivity. So according to a researcher, Seamus, they observed that there's an inverse correlation between cyber sickness, which is discomfort in VR, and task performance, with several studies showing that symptoms of sickness are linked to decreased task performance. And then I'll update this presentation to link to these studies, but there are about 5 of 6 studies that show that when the users are not as comfortable, they're not going to be as productive in that environment. Ultimately, many people that suffer from cyber sickness, they're just going to take the VR headset off altogether and terminate the session, and they won't even complete the task. Broken down comfortable into sets of physical comfort and psychological comfort. So basically, it's important to make sure that when adding text to your experience, that it is at a comfortable viewing distance. There are some effects like vection, for example. Vection is when the background moves, the background is moving at a constant speed, and the background is so large that it covers our entire field of view, and we get to a point that we don't know if we are the ones moving or if the environment moving, and that creates some feeling of discomfort. And also there's some link between the movement of the horizon, the acceleration of the character, the turning, and the collisions of the camera. All of these have been linked to discomfort in VR that break the illusion and make the user not want to explore that experience. And also the psychological factors, like in real life, some people might be scared of heights, sharp objects, large or small spaces. user agency, meaning some things that typically bother people. For example, like you enter a room and there is a crook picture on the wall. It creates it's not too bad, but it creates discomfort. And if the user is not able to fix that, and they're stuck looking at crooked things or misaligned things, and they have some sort of sensitivity to that, it will cause discomfort. So, and also a sense of scale, making sure that things look right and they have the appropriate size will make sure that the user feels comfortable. So yeah, so I covered the design principles for immersion. On our next talk, I'll cover the principles for exploration, and then lastly, the narrative. So thanks for coming. Yeah.